All right, well, we're going to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome to this Q&A. Question comes up actually more frequently than not, and the question is: if I pray for something I need, obviously, and I don't get answered, what do I do? And not only that, if, I pray for certain things, and the situation gets worse. Right? So someone told me, whatever, a long time ago, that there's an omen, there's a good omen for, let's say, if a person needs livelihood or a shidduch, or to find a marriage partner, right? That you say Perik Shira. Now, Perik Shira, you have all these animals and certain verses by them. It's not whatever, it's like 6 chapters. Not very whatever. Can't take a little bit. It can't take 10, 15 minutes to say it. So someone told me, they say it every day. You're allowed to say it. You're allowed to say it on Shabbos also. And it's supposed to be good for livelihood and what's it called? For livelihood and a shidduch, to find a marriage partner. So very good. Now, as we always say, nothing's a guarantee, except death and taxes. But nonetheless, a lot of people have had salvation by saying this. On a daily basis. Now, somebody says, I've been saying it, and the idea is to say 40 days, right? You say 40 straight days. You can say whatever you say during the day, you can say it at night, as long as the whole day doesn't go by, or whatever, the whole next day doesn't go by till sundown. Nonetheless, really, you should say it for 40 days. If you miss a day, you got to say it again. You got to, start over. But regardless, what happened? Instead of 40 days, so livelihood issues got worse, and they didn't meet their prospective partner. They get back to me and they say, "What should I do? What should I do?" So I told them very straight. I said, "Say it again. Do another 40 days." Yeah. So the question is, that, if I do this or I do any of these things, whatever it may be, right? Whatever it may be, it's not abracadabra, things like change overnight. There are different things that can offset it, let's say. So a person will say, but I said it. It should work. Okay, but again, there could be other factors involved, or even if I do any number of things that's supposed to bring in heavenly influence, and it doesn't, let's say there are other things going on, as we always say. In other words, some sort of block. This doesn't help. When's it going to help, or when's anything going to help? When God decides, right? When God decides it's going to help, it will help, right? As we say, Yeshua Hashem Kerafayim, right? Somewhere points out that the salvation of God comes with the blink of an eyelash, right? No overnight, right? We spoke, last week that it can come where you least expect it, right? And usually that's where the salvation comes from. Now, there is frustration, though, because the person will say, "Well, I did this. Why is it getting worse? Or why is it not being answered?" So Rabbi says, very interesting. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshas Veschoda, the word Veschoda means to entreat, really means to beg. Yeah. Moshe Rabbeinu, the miracle value over there is, I don't know, 520, I think. 520, or it's over 500 for sure. I think it's 520, could be wrong, but I think it's 520. He said 520 different prayers to get into the land of Israel. God made a decree. God told him, for striking the rock, you're not going into the land. Yeah, very hard to understand exactly what the sin was, because essentially even by striking the rock and water came out was also a big miracle. Yeah, so that's also sanctification of God's eyes, but in God's name. But obviously God didn't think so. Okay. But he didn't give up hope. 520 prayers, different prayers. And finally, what does God tell him? God says, stop praying. That's it. I don't want to hear any more prayers. Because God may have allowed him to enter if he would have continued to pray. But even though it's a divine decree, you can ask the question, a very simple question. Right? God says, you're not doing X, Y, or Z. It's a decree. He said, this is never going to happen. Yeah, so what should a person do? A person normally probably give up hope. They say, I'm not even going to try. Why am I not going to try? God told me. You could ask the question of Moshe Rabbeinu if God gave him a divine decree. Why is he praying? Well, that's an obvious question. God told him, you're not getting in. You're not getting in. That's it. You didn't sanctify my name the way I wanted. You're not getting in. Okay. So why is he praying? What's the purpose of prayer over here? So one possible answer is, even though God said that, it's divine decree, it's not going to change. Can he invoke enough divine mercy to change it? So he continued until God told him to stop. Till God told him to stop. Now, we're not given this information. Right? We are not given this information at all. We don't know. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Since we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, you never give up hope. You never give up hope. But Rabbi says, so based on that, why do people's prayers don't get answered? You can say, because God doesn't want to answer. Because you don't deserve to be answered. It's bad for you, whatever. Yeah, that's possibly one answer. What's the second answer? What's the second answer? So the answer he gives is that when you pray, you gotta beg. Yeah? When you pray, you gotta beg. If you don't beg, that's why prayers don't get answered. And we mentioned this before. A person has slichos, as a book of penitential prayer to say in the month of El, right? For Sephardim, you say it the entire month. For Ashkenazim, you say it usually a week before Rosh Hashanah. So what's the difference in previous generations between the slichos that they have? The prayers are the same. They haven't changed. Between the slichos of previous generations and our slichos. The prayer books are the same. Right? They look exactly the same. Some more worn out, less worn out. Doesn't matter. It's the same. All the prayers are the same. What's the fundamental difference? Previous generations, those prayer books are drenched in tears. That's the difference. Our prayer books, dry. Extremely dry. Big difference. When you pray, you gotta mean it. You gotta feel it. I mean, it's not an easy thing. Sometimes we're able to push out maybe a tear or two on Tisha B'Av, saddest day of the year. It's a lack in us. 100% a lack in us. There's no question. Was there any wonder? Any wonder if a prayer book is totally dry, or a slichas book is totally dry, those prayers should be answered. Says you gotta beg. If I'll give an example. Person goes into a job interview. Go into a job interview. They'll look at your qualifications. They'll look at what you've done. This and that, previous work, whatever it is. And then one of the things they're probably going to ask you is, why should we hire you? Right? What do you bring to the table? What are you going to help us with? Now, person interviewing, what should they do? Convince them. You got to convince them. Yeah. How are you going to convince them? Because if a person has to be passionate. I mean, within reason. You have to show. You have to show what you bring to the table. If a person says a magical formula, goes through the motions, says the words, remember, a person can be doing all the motions, saying all the words in prayer and not praying. Pretty harsh statement, but it's true. You're saying the words, you're going through the motions, your mind's somewhere else. Totally somewhere else. Now, you get credit probably for saying it like that. Maybe a C minus, as Kaufman would say. Yeah. But in some cases, you get a 0. You get an F. Why? Because you're just saying the words. You're not doing anything. You gotta mean it. It's gonna come from the depths of your heart. From deep in the heart. That's where it's gonna come from. Anything less than that, why is God gonna be moved? Yeah. Because people, I really need it. This is very hard. That's very hard. God understands that. God's no dummy. He understands. He knows what's deep in a person's heart. What's going to get God to move? What's going to get him, let's say, whatever it is, the person going through a hardship, whatever it is. Why is you going to change it? Why in the world should you change it? You were put in that situation for a reason. Wasn't it, what do you call it, just by random? You earned it. Right? You earned that situation. Let's say you did to yourself. Make it very simple. You did to yourself. Now, if you did it to yourself, you got no one to blame but yourself. Which that's hard enough. Okay. But what do I have to do over here? I have to show, or we have to show, or whoever it is, has to show they're worthy of divine mercy. That's what they have to do. Yeah? Now, you know, and I know, and God knows, and everyone else knows, right? Or let's say God knows, let's say better, right? He knows. Is saying the words enough? Is going through the motions enough? You gotta show why, God can say, why should I change my mind? What are you bringing to me? What are you bringing to the table? If a person feels, they're on their knees and there's nowhere else to turn and you're backed into a corner, for whatever it is, and you have no one else to turn to but God himself, you're going to beg. You're going to beg. Why are you going to beg? Because you're in pain. Because you have difficulty. Now, let's say God's okay. I've been hearing these prayers for a long time. I see there's something different here. Good. God's going to change it. Now, what would happen if God changes his mind? You get that salvation, whatever it is, and that salvation does not do anything to move you. The salvation doesn't do anything. Go back to being the same schnook you were before. You thank God for what you got. Very good. But your everyday actions are no different. Now, God can turn around and say, wait a minute, I just turned the tide here. I just turned the tide here. That's the best you give me? You didn't, really change much? Okay. I have my own reasons for changing now. For changing your situation. Like imagine person's drowning. God forbid. Person's drowning. Someone jumps in and saves your life. Saves your life. You're about to go under or you're under. They save your life. Well, obviously you have obligations to this person now. They brought you back from the dead. Yeah. Nobody likes to be, have that kind of obligation. Okay, but they saved you. They saved your life. Now, let's say 2 years later, they need a favor. This person comes to you with it needs a favor. Now, the favor that he's asking you is a very hard thing to do. It's a very inconvenient thing to do. It takes a person out of their, out of their easy zone, so to speak. It's not something they want to do. If someone else would have asked them, they'd probably say no. But here they feel obligated. They feel subservient over it. Why? Saved your life. Literally, they saved your life. You owe them. 100% you owe them. So seemingly, whatever they would ask you to do within reason, you jump at the opportunity. Pay him back. He gave you your life back. He's asking for a favor. It's a very hard thing to do. Goes out of your comfort zone. That's what I was thinking of. But you go out of your comfort zone majorly. And in general, you never do this probably for almost anyone else. But now you have the opportunity to pay back. So even if it's hard, but at the end of the day, before that, person who saved your life, aren't you going to show them the greatest gratitude in the world? Aren't you going to say all the praises to them? You're never going to take them for granted, ever. They get on the phone and say, oh, how are you? It's so nice to hear from you. I mean, doesn't matter what mood you're in. Yeah, won't matter. Yeah, because you owe this person your life. You owe this person your life, even on your worst day. Yeah, you ain't going to show it to them. Or you say, well, I can't talk now, whatever, I'll get back to you. Okay, get out of get out of the funk that you're in. Okay. Yeah, but you're gonna be ecstatic there for this person. So nice to hear from you. Like, you call them up every so often, and just because you have gratitude. You have absolute gratitude. And that would never change. Should never change. Right? Almost no matter what this person does afterwards, gratitude, the strength of that gratitude is still there. As if he did it yesterday, pulled you out of the mud. Yeah? Pulled you out of the water. Saved you. I think the person has the right to abuse you and other things. I'm talking about that. Right? But at the end of the day, look what the thankfulness will be. Look what the gratitude will be. That doesn't mean you worship them, but look at the gratitude. You can never take that relationship for granted, ever. Not only that, you would do whatever you can to pay the person back, not monetarily. Yeah. If they ever needed a favor, something, whatever. Because look at the gratitude you have. Literally, they saved your life. You owe them everything. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Right? So then when you talk to a month later, you're going to be nonchalant? Of course not. Yeah, you're going to be singing their praises. Yeah, what can I do for you? Can I help you? Can I this? You'll thank them up the gazoo for life. For life. Yeah, and that should never change. Why? Because you feel the subservience. And you owe them. 100%, you owe them. Because of what they did. They didn't do it for accolades. They do it for money. They didn't saw someone drowning. They came in, they helped you. So how could you ever take that for granted? How could you ever forget? Well, we'll make it even more graphic. You take the greatest generation in the history of man. The Jewish people saw God face to face. And they saw all the miracles in Egypt, 20% that came out. They saw the miracles. They saw the miracles in the desert. They saw the miracles of Mount Sinai. Yeah, they saw all these things. And you see, time and again, they complain. We need this, we need that, other things. Even by the greatest generation, they could get lulled into sleep and forget. Now you're going to say, but how is that possible? How is that possible? You see what happened to the Egyptians, how they got decimated. You see that nothing, for the Jewish people, got hurt, got taken away, this, that. Everything was good. Okay, 80% didn't come out, but that's not the point. The ones that saw, witnessed it, sure. Is that something can be forgotten? Yeah, we missed the fish. We missed the watermelon. We want quail. We want meat. How do you forget so quickly? See, if you tell me in this generation that, this cream puff generation, we live in a world, of Hester, so Hester upon him. In a world of God's hiddenness within hiddenness, we don't understand anything we see, anything going on. Then I can hear. Right? Even if we understand, we put it in our heart, but I can understand. Because we live in an upside down world, totally upside down world. But I would ask the question, if the greatest generation in the history of man, witnessed these miracles, open miracles, how is it possible? And this is a hard question, because we have no idea who these people were. Yeah, but you have to ask the question, how is it possible, A, to take things for granted with all the miracles they saw, and even better, when it came to the sin of the golden calf, they really thought this calf took them out as an intermediary. Yeah, they made a mistake. In the calculation, Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to come back. It was only the mixed multitude. People will say, okay, but they fell very far, very fast. Very, very fast. It was the work of the evil inclination because, had they had proper faith, they would have straight into the land. The evil inclination gets destroyed. So whatever. He was in the business to make them mess up. Okay. But even with that, even as strong as the evil inclination was, but they saw open miracles. So you're going to say, in this case, if you're talking about such a great generation, they saw the open miracles and they failed. Well, can't have a claim against us 2,000, 3,500 years later. And how can you have that claim? If they messed up, what? We're not going to mess up? We're not going to take things for granted? Right? It's a good question. Right? Same thing with Korah. Korah comes against Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen, really against the priesthood, against Aaron HaKohen. So it says where Moshe finds in the blessed memory. In Drash Moshe, from Parshas Korah, he didn't internalize the message. He saw the miracles, but he didn't get the message. And he was jealous and that killed him. That's mind-boggling. He held the ark, he didn't die. He saw through divine inspiration, right? Who's going to come out of him? The greatness is going to come out of him. It wasn't a slouch by any stretch. You better have to understand. As we always say. So even if I see a miracle, even if I witness in this case, God took us out of our misery, whatever the misery was, that prayer got answered. Maybe not the way we thought, certainly not the way we thought, certainly not in the time frame, let's say. Wasn't necessarily on the spot. Maybe it took 2 weeks, a month, took longer, whatever it is, right? Very well could be. Very well could be. Certainly what we didn't expect. But then let's say it happens. Let's say it actually happened. Very good. What happened 10 seconds after that? An hour after that? Even better. What happened 2 weeks later? What happened 2 weeks later? A week later, you forgot about the whole thing. You're dealing with other things now. What happened to gratitude? Where'd the gratitude go? So there's an old adage. The old adage is, what have you done for me lately? That's the old adage. What do you mean? You got pulled out of the mud. God brought you back to life. You go back, pray in the same way. So you say, this generation will forget easily. And previous generations, they didn't. You talk about the generation that got the Torah, Mount Sinai. Slipped their mind. Moshe Rabbeinu took them out. After all the miracles they saw. And they thought this calf really did it. It's very hard to understand. You know, an American comes to the Brisker of Rabbi Salvation, blessed memory. Comes to Jerusalem, meets with him, and he says, there were more open miracles. Yeah, if God would do more open miracles, well, more people come back to Judaism. So Brisker Rav says, no. Why not? Because the Brisker Rav held, the only one, right? But he held, you got to be a vessel. You got to be able to see. You got to have the eyes to see. If you don't have the eyes to see, God can do an open miracle right in front of your face and you won't recognize it. That's very depressing. Extremely depressing. So every second of every day that we pray, whenever we pray, as we said before, it has to come from the depths of the heart. No question. And whatever we have today, we have absolutely zero guarantee what's going to be tomorrow. Right? King Solomon says in Proverbs, you don't know what today's going to bring. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Yeah, a person wakes up or let's say doesn't wake up tomorrow, they die. Okay. Yeah. Or other things happen. That you totally didn't expect. Or you never did expect it. You didn't expect it to happen this way. Or happen that way. So, for a guy who prays 3 times a day, or a woman at least twice, prayer should come straight from the heart. My Hasidic side here coming out a little bit. With all the depth, with all the emotion as possible, even though prayer is very hard. It's one of the things that always needs to be strengthened, the Gemara says. Because sometimes you feel like you're just praying to a wall. But at the end of the day, you can't take anything for granted. Person's business is doing well today, you beg, and that should stay that way. Person shouldn't say, wow, business is great today, it's been great for the last week, for the last month, for the last 6 months, the last year, the last 2 years, 5, whatever. Everything's been going good. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. There's there where I go learn in the morning, the street there, they block off. Part of it they blocked off now for at least the next 4 months. Doing construction on, we're fixing up the roads in one, fixing up a road in one direction for a bike lane. Yeah, they want, I don't know, some reason people on scooters or whatever, so they want to widen, the sidewalks or whatever for like there are so many people, on scooters in this area. I was like, wow, maybe I'll get one. So maybe I'll get one, so at least now I can use the bigger pathway in the next 4 or 5 months. Yeah, but what's this doing though? Yeah, you can only travel one direction on the street. So there's a whole area. There's a whole area where you got nowhere to park. And you got stores there. You have a whole bunch of stores there. All kinds of different stores there. Now these stores are going to feel the crunch because people can't get there. Nowhere to park. Yeah, it'd be a nightmare. 4 months, so the road changes. Now it's not going to put someone out of business per se. But what likelihood could happen? Less people are going to come, and it makes sense because they can't get there. There's no way to get there. And even if you could get there, you got nowhere to park. So what are you going to do? So again, it's a temporary thing. They say 4 months, it could be a year, who knows? Right? You never take what they say, face value, literally. But whatever. Let's say it's 4 months. Right? We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, even though we don't have to. You give them the benefit of the doubt. 4 months. Yeah, their livelihood just changed. Yeah, they could have known about it, for months, and they said this is coming. We're going to do it this time. Whatever. Maybe they pushed it off, whatever. But now it's starting. Now it's starting. So you know what's happening. Yeah, this could wreak havoc, make it very difficult. Now, even if they know it's going to happen. Yeah, and let's say it finally gets implemented, so your brain now shifts because okay, so I have more time. We still have more time, and now it got started. Okay, right. So now it's in the front of your brain, not necessarily in the back of your brain. And now, what are you saying? What's going to be? The person has proper faith and belief in God. Say, God, give me a partner either way. Give me livelihood no matter what. If I deserve to have less right now, I have less. Yeah, if it stays the same, it stays the same. Yeah, if I lose, I lose. Yeah, but you don't lose. You get what you deserve. Fine. But it's something not in your control. And it was going to be done. Now it's going to be done. Okay. So what happens? So now you're preparing. How much you might lose. What's it really going to cost? How are we going to get it back? Whatever it is. It affects you. Change the road in one direction, kill a person. Could kill a person's business. Remember, my father had a parking business. Yeah. And there were times they'd do, I don't know, sort of construction on the road, getting there. Cause problems. People can't get there. Yeah. Other factors. So again, you get what you ever deserve. That's the main thing. Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're not in control. Again, even in this case, they've been talking about it for months and for a long time. They're going to do it, back and forth, this, that. And now it's reality. Now it's reality. So what's the reaction? What's the reaction? So up until that point, person's praying the same. Let's say, keep everything good. I don't deserve it, and I'm nothing, and you're keeping me going in this and that. Okay. And now your prayers may intensify because, you gotta see how it goes for the next number of months. But you can't take anything for granted. A person works for a company. I say the company's been around, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, more. And then the company has, something happens. Something happens. The person gets let go. Because isn't it pretty safe? You're working for a stable company? Sure. You think it's been around for so long? They're going out of business. You're lucky. Went out of business. Or they had to, downsize, tremendously. A person lost their job. So a person's going to say, but you don't have guarantee. A person's going to say, like, come on, the company's been around forever. Like, expect something to happen? You don't. I worked for a company 3-4 years ago, and something happened. And, they were like guilty by association, even though they didn't do anything wrong, per se. Kill the business. Overnight. Guilty by association. And this company was doing very well. Very, very well. They had a whole, office there for men, for women, in the States as well, a big office there, whatever. They were a main thing in their industry for years. I don't know if it's, come back in any way, shape, or form, but they got creamed. Totally creamed. Overnight. Overnight. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Problem was their name was on a document. Guilty by association. I mean, they didn't have any legal trouble, per se. But they're guilty by association. They killed him. Killed him overnight. So, basically they shut down here. That was it. There were subtle cuts, and then bam. It's like, yeah, it's after this happened. Yeah, I hadn't worked there for a year, 11 months. You have to work for a year to get compensation, get unemployment. Yeah, couldn't even get unemployment. So, so I looked up to heaven and I said, okay, I didn't enjoy what I was doing per se. Probably took a few years off my life anyway because of the schedule. But either way, I said, now what? I was like, what do you want now? I did what I didn't want to do. Felt I had no choice. Okay. Yeah, now what? So things turned overnight after that. And I was doing similar things I was doing before. Didn't expect anything to change dramatically. She was, I told the story before. She was a Shem Karafine. Things would change overnight. But according to nature, what I know from the previous years, they're not going to change. It's not going to change dramatically. And if I would have said it, people would have said, "Come on, it's not realistic. It's wishful thinking at best. Wishful thinking." So it's okay. I'll put my best foot forward. Keep my ears and eyes open. And see what's going to be. They got over the floodgates 2 weeks later. Within 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What changed? Can't answer. Could be. My attitude totally changed. That could be. But okay, you're in charge. Yeah, you're in charge. And I don't know what you want here. This is the way it is. You want to flush me? You flush me. Okay. It's the way it goes. I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. Yeah, prayers aren't going to stop. It's kind of strange the way it happened. Okay. And then things changed. So again, did my prayer intensify so much that it, totally change what happened? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. Or I just kept saying the mantra over and over again, you're in charge. Or I kept saying, listen, I did what I had to do. This is the end result. All right, now you show me. You show me the path. Show me the way. Yeah, you're the one in charge. Okay. Was a turnaround expected? Never. Never. I would say this unbelievable self-sacrifice. And God sees self-sacrifice, and that changes. Yeah, I've seen that. With a number of people. Unbelievable self-sacrifice, God turned things overnight. Changed things overnight. Literally overnight. Spiritual terms, and livelihood-wise. Yeah. Why? Serious nefesh. Self-sacrifice. So again, I can't answer. Can't answer. But what's the mantra? The mantra is, he's in charge. That's the answer. Yeah. We do nothing. We put our best foot forward. Very good. Right? Very good. We put our best foot forward. Okay. But again, as Chol says, in Shar B'tachon, no guarantee. There's absolutely no guarantee. You need the big X factor, the big X man. That's God himself. Pray as much as you want, it doesn't change because God doesn't want to change. It doesn't change. It shouldn't get worse, but it doesn't change. So we can't take it. So the point is, on a daily basis, can't take anything for granted. You can take nothing for granted. We always say, person walks out the door, they have a guarantee of coming back? I don't have a guarantee. You'll say, probably. See you soon, hopefully. Go walk out that door, get flattened, get in the car, so who knows what? Drop dead of a heart attack. The great rabbi passed away on Shmini Atzeres, last day on Simchas Torah. Simple story, 60 years old, bam, heart attack. That was it. Right, everyone's in shock. Tremendous shock. Did he think, do you have any inkling? No. They have heart disease? Not that I know of. Wasn't sick. He ran himself down here and there, but okay, but didn't have any real health issues, as far as I know. Guess what? God took him. And God took him at 60 years old. I don't know. King Solomon says, you don't know what today's going to bring, you know what tomorrow's going to bring. There's no idea. No idea what the circumstances are. Got to put our best foot forward, okay? You got to try and prepare. But he owes us nothing. He owes us nothing. We owe him everything. So just like he gives us life, so imagine, this guy saved us, saved somebody, pulled him out of the water. Yeah, God does that on a daily basis. Pulls you out of the water, saves you, takes care of your needs, whether we think we need more or not, or whatever. Okay, yeah, person's not starving, not living on the streets, not other things going on. In general. Our prayers on a daily basis, which would be like screaming to the roof. Screaming to the roof. Maybe like those, Khalid or Hasidim. They scream when they pray. Now, some people say that if you scream, it's like, God is deaf. He doesn't hear you. Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, others say why you scream, because when a person yells, or a person speaks loud, let's say, has an effect on them. They hear the words much greater, when they scream it out. It has an effect. When a person says Psuke de Zimmer, those verses of song, should really sing them. Yeah, we sort of mutter them, let's say, in the morning, and hopefully we're awake enough, to know what we're saying, at least. But really, according to Allah, you should be singing them. I don't know any place it does, right? But really, you should be singing them. Singing God's praise for everything he does. For Chazon Ish, from Rabbi Yishai Karo, to bless the memory, right? Who basically built up Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak was nothing, just a mountain, like many places here, and tremendous place of Torah today. So he was not strong by nature. Yeah, he was relatively weak physically. He put so much into prayer, he had to lie down afterwards. He had no strength afterwards. I wasn't yelling and screaming. Poured out his heart. Poured out his heart. That's the way it should be. Again, maybe my Hasidic side here coming out a little bit. Right? That's how you get prayers answered. Because it comes from the heart. Yeah? You got to entreat. You got to beg. Right? That's what the word Veschanon means. Right? To beg. It means to entreat, but it means to beg. You cannot take one thing for granted. Not one. Yeah? So a person will say, I prayed, this, and I'm trying. Okay, that's what God wants to see. He wants to see you putting in the effort. So why does he make it so hard? Because he wants a person sometimes to realize, or maybe many times, to realize you control nothing. Someone's pointing out today, very, very interesting. What's the difference between all the imahos? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Valeah. Last week's parsha, Chayei, right? I said she's 127 years old, 100, 20, 7, and all her years were equal. Yeah, what do you mean all her years are equal? She suffered like no tomorrow. She got, she got taken by Pharaoh, Avimelech. Yeah, she couldn't have children. She had a lot of tests, tremendous amount of tests. But what was constant? Never complained. You don't hear her complain about anything. Yeah, she never complained. Rivka, you see this week's parsha, what's going on in my stomach, whatever, complained. Rachel, give me children, whatever, complains. Leah complains. That's the difference. She did not complain about anything. Right? Because it's very hard to say, come on, if you're 7, how are you like 20? Yeah. If you're 20, how are you like 100? I mean, the years aren't equal. But even whatever she went through, she didn't complain. That's the difference. That's the difference between her and everyone else. And all the other imams. So on a higher level. Higher level. But at the same time, what did all of them crave more than anything else? To have children. And they knew they were building up the Jewish people. The Connors ask, okay, so why do you make them barren? Why do you make it so hard? The commentary's answer, very simple, because God likes the prayers of the righteous. What? God can't get them to pray, stronger if everything's going good. When a person's in need and feels in desperate need, they pray differently. No question. You pray totally different. Like your life is on the line. Our lives are always on the line. We don't see it in general. That's the way it is. So how can a person just go through the motions? How is that possible? See, when your life is on the line, you understand. You got nowhere to turn. You got bad medical report. You got, livelihood, is very hard. Other things are hard. Yeah, and you feel there's nowhere else to turn. You feel like your back's against the wall, there's nowhere else to go. Yeah, we should be praying like that on a daily basis, even when we don't have problems. Because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You want things to stay the same. If they're good. Right? But you got to bank. And just saying the word's not enough. I'm not talking about Kabbalistic attention. Saying the word's not enough. Going through the motions not enough. I see some people that pray, some people on a very high level. There's a conversation there, not just saying the word. You see, there's a conversation. There's different levels, okay. And it's something on a daily basis that's hard. Person has to sleep, let's say, or they can get enough sleep, or they got other worries, or, thinking about other things. Okay, but a person has, to the best of their ability. You can't run into prayer. You have to take a step back, clear your mind if possible. I mean, that's what you really have to do. And focus. Now, in the morning, it's a little bit harder because, a lot more prayers to say. Okay. But that focus. But you have to understand what the focus is. It's not just like it's a yoke and I have to do it, otherwise I'm going to fry in hell forever. Prayer is essential. Essential. Moshe Schneider, my Rabbi of blessed memory, would say to his students, the entire day is dependent on how you prayed. The entire day, your entire day of learning depends on how well you prayed in the morning and how well you prayed during the day. That is the key. That is the key. So for us, same thing. A person's not learning all day. So what? A person has to work. Very good. Got to make sanctification of God's name, when a person's working, but it all starts with prayer. So what we can always say, certain amount of prayers, I can't say all of them. Okay, it's better to say fewer prayers with more intention than more prayer with no intention. But we have to understand also the basic premise, we have nothing coming to us. Yeah, we don't deserve anything. So nonetheless, we're still going to thank him. Still have to have gratitude. A million things spoke yesterday in my BJQ podcast. Yeah, the importance of understanding that you have to have gratitude. You have to say that, and that brings wealth to God. The only problem is we have hardship. A lot of hardship. So it's hard to see the love if you go through hardship. Okay. I spoke about that yesterday. Spoken about that quite a bit. Yeah, but a million things to be thankful for. So someone says, it can't get worse. Having such a hard time in different things? It can't get worse. All right? So we always say, the Gemara says, Al titach peh l'satan. Yeah, you never open your mouth to Mr. S. Oh, really? You don't think it could get worse? Yeah? You don't think it'll get worse? Let me show you. Let me show you. It'll make it worse. You never open your mouth. Never open your mouth. Everyone has their own thing to deal with. Very good. But we have a problem. We all, everyone in the same boat. A lot of times we think, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm trying, I'm doing enough, I'm trying to do enough. My prayer should be answered. God should help me over here. Why am I going through this hardship? It's a common thing people will say, right? But if you think about the bigger picture, before your head hits the pillow, before you go to sleep, just take a self-accounting, right? Just take a self-accounting. Go cheshbon nefesh. Think about what you did during the day. In spiritual terms. Did you pray? How did you pray? No matter what your obligation is, whatever. Did you make blessings? How did you interact with others? Go through the day. Now, did you get an A plus? Did you get a B minus? Did you get an F? Right? And we got to look at that day realistically, not just throwing ourselves under the bus. That would be easy. But realistically. Now, if a person's realistic, right, be very depressing here. Now ask the question, why are my prayers getting answered? Well, you just answered. You just answered the question. Because let's say you got a B minus. Your day today was a B minus. That's not bad. Well, is that good enough that it should turn the tide? You're going to say, but I can't have an A plus day every day. Maybe one day a week, if that, I'll get an A plus. Or an A minus. Okay. Yeah, if we're lucky. I can break it down more, make, no one will get out of bed or do anything after that. But because we don't come close, as Kosovo says, we don't come close to reaching our potential. Doing what we should do. Forget reaching potential, doing what we should do. We're do a third, a half, a quarter. Okay, so there's no hope. Essentially, there's no hope. Right? But God has mercy also. We can invoke mercy. But the point is, if realistically we see the bigger picture, let's say better. Let's say when we're doing the evaluation, we say, okay, I'm going to play God now. I put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache, very good. I'm going to play God now. Now, you're God looking at yourself. Kind of hard to do. But let's say you're God looking at yourself and what you've done during the day. I'm just talking about one day. How are you going to evaluate that? You're going to give yourself a passing grade? You're going to give yourself an F? You're going to give yourself anything in between? Realistically. If we have these big expectations, and just how we're supposed to live on a daily basis. So then when you put yourself in those shoes, those big shoes, now you know what the answer is. And the answer is, we have to invoke mercy. we have to invoke mercy. Why? Because in the bigger scheme of things, as we always say, you're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. God can flatten you like a pancake, like a fly, anytime he wants. It doesn't. But in the bigger picture, we have what to say. We don't have anything to say. We fail with this, we fail with that, we fail with the other thing. We still want to invoke divine mercy. We still want to go in the right path. We still want to, live inspired and do what we need to do, right? But again, what's someone going to say? But it shouldn't be this hard, right? Shouldn't be that. But think about in God's mind. And think about where we should be holding in general, right? We're not a potato farmer anymore. No offense, anyone's a potato farmer, right? Who grew up in Idaho. Yeah, we're holding somewhere in the world. It's greater responsibility, huge responsibility. So God looks at us differently. Okay. That means you have to work double hard, triple hard. Very good. We're going to have failures? We'll have failures. We have major failures? Good. God understands that. Okay. But you got to beg. You got to beg for every last thing you have because you don't deserve it, right? The most humble. Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu, right? The most humble of all men. What did Avram say a few weeks ago? Avram said one of the most humble statements you'll hear anyone say in history. He said, "Ani afar ve'efer." I'm dust and I'm ashes. He understood how great he was. He understood how much power he had. Yeah, he understood what his purpose was. But he also understood in the bigger scheme of things, he's a worm. He's nothing. In God's world, he's nothing. Yeah, he's dust. Right? He's dust, he's dirt, he's ashes. Worth nothing. Worth nothing to God in general. Yeah, there's a discussion, Gemara Eruvin says, a discussion between House of Hill, House of Shammai for 2.5 years was a good thing. Man was created or not. Back and forth. Yes, no, this proof, that proof, whatever. 2.5 years. After that, they came to the conclusion that a man should have been created. But if man is created, what's our obligation? We have to look at our actions. That's what we have to do. We have to think about what we do. We have to think about what we say. We have to think about how we act. Right? All these things. Very good. Right? That's our obligation. Are we going to fail? Sure. We're going to fall short? Probably. But at the end of the day, he's giving you things you don't deserve. Sure, you don't deserve. If God would judge, he wanted to create the world at the beginning, total divine justice. But he said, if I create it with divine justice, no one will live. No one will be able to live. So I have divine justice with divine mercy. Okay. God didn't know the future. Didn't know man couldn't. He said there are people that won't be able to do it, but not the majority. Certainly not the majority. Now imagine, according to strict justice, if God was only going to rule the world according to strict justice, you'd all be happy because we'd all be dead. Right? You wouldn't have to listen to me. We'd all be dead. Who can live according to strict justice? You got a few people in history, got judged that way. But who can live according to strict justice? Scott says, okay, I'm going to mitigate it with what? With mercy. I'm going to put mercy in there also, because that's the only way mankind will survive. If there was only strict justice, you had to control your thoughts every second of every day. One split second you veer off, that's it. It's over. I mean, it's impossible. And for this generation, nothing to talk about. Previous generations, also nothing to talk about. Nobody would be here. You have to be like such unbelievable self-control. I mean, you read the book Path of the Just, and the Ramchal speaks, a chapter about Nikias. Yeah, about cleanliness. Right? There he's talking about cleanliness of thought. Person gets to that chapter, you start going through it, you shut it. You shut the book. Who can say 100% they have cleanliness of thought at all times? Yeah. But that's the level we need to reach. We need to try and reach. You always got to be in control. But there's so many things. So many things that we need to work on that we're weak in, for sure. God is mercy, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. A person prays, yeah, you got to pray for your needs, spiritually, physically. But you got to pray like you don't deserve anything. And you got to pray you're at the mercy of the king. That's how you get things answered. Is to feel you're on your knees. Now, when you're on your knees, that's easy. When things are going good, it's not so easy. Yeah, everything's going good. Someone, before Rosh Hashanah, comes to my Rabbi for a blessing. So he says, what blessing do you want? He says, guy, seems to be a religious Jew. And he says, this has been good, good, it's been really been booming this year. Everything's great. So I want a blessing. God should not interfere in my life. He should just leave me alone, let things go as it is, and he shouldn't interfere in my life. I said, come on, someone really said that? He said, yeah. He brings it down many times in the story. Says it before Rosh Hashanah. Yeah. He said, I give you a blessing like that. God should have part of your life. God just like disappear, make everything, make everything stay the same. That's not a real blessing. Yeah. The answer is okay. If you have setbacks, you should be overcome it, this, that, even if you have trials and tribulations, you be able to overcome it, but you take God out of the picture. So we said it's very, when things are going good in general, people don't pray as well. You take it for granted. Cannot take anything for granted. Not one thing. Not one thing. Yeah, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. No idea what tomorrow's going to bring. But it's much easier to pray when things are impossible. But again, what's the idea? The idea is God's in control. Yeah, God is in control, and at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that. Probably say it 1,000 times a day, right? You have to acknowledge that, and you have to realize what's coming to you don't deserve. So therefore, on a daily basis, you got to beg. You got to beg. It stays the same, or whatever. Other things get better, whatever it is. You have to entreat. That's what it means. Because if you don't do that, you say the words, you're not praying. Essentially, maybe you get credit, maybe not, right? But it's gonna be like you're at the end of your rope. You don't know what it's gonna be for anything. You got to think that even when things are good, because you don't know. You absolutely don't know. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Israel Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos of Q&As, Ethics for Fathers, Book of Leviticus. Want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCO